welcome to another episode of Conversation with a Chef. I'm Jo Ritty, and I love sharing with you the conversations I get to have with talented and passionate chefs. It's the backstory, if you will, to the food they're putting up. I begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the lands and airwaves where this conversation takes place. Land which was never ceded. Land where communities came together to eat seasonally, locally, and without exhausting resources. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and rising. Today I'm talking to Stephen Nairn at Yugen Dining. Stephen is the epitome of the passionate chef. His love for food, the industry, his team, and for always learning more is palpable. I'd spoken to Stephen over the phone for Broadsheet when Yugen Dining opened, and quite frankly, I was grinning like a lunatic on the other end of the line because I was just lapping up the way he described the dishes. He pointed out that when he says the menu is led by the five senses, that's not just a fluff statement. I doubt Stephen ever makes fluff statements. He's articulate and thoughtful, and I could have listened for hours. I learned so much. When he mentions a sensory approach, he's talking about identifying a range of ingredients he wants to work with, and then applying salt, acid, fat, umami, steam, charcoal, not so much to manipulate the flavour in order to change the ingredients, but to extract the most out of the flavour. For example, he says the depth of flavour in the Drunken Poussin on the Yugen Dining menu sings from all the right notes. When I arrived to speak to him in person, we talked about our days, and I mentioned I was a teacher. Stephen comes from a family of teachers, but was himself drawn to cooking, and once in, could not get enough of it, starting in Glasgow and working himself up through the best restaurants there, then London, then New York, and 11 Madison Park. He came to Melbourne intending to stay only 2 months, and 10 years on, he's worked for Shannon Bennett, Scott Pickett, and is now LK Culinary Director of Yugen Dining, Yugen Tea Bar, and Omnia Bistro and Bar. This was one of my favourite conversations, and I can't wait for you to listen.
As a business management teacher and a principal, and my dad was a history and modern studies teacher and a headmaster.
Oh, wow.
And my mum was a primary school teacher, and my brother is a mathematics teacher.
Oh my goodness.
So I know all about the
the
challenges. This is a really difficult job. Not everyone thinks, oh, well, you get the holidays.
I know people say that, but that's a perk. That's the perk of the job.
That's the perk of the job, but there's heaps of, I'm sure, other challenges. Take a seat.
Thank you. Wow. I always dreamed of sitting in the orb.
Oh, yeah, the famous orb.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to speak to you because when I spoke to you for the Broadsheet article, the way you described the food was so amazing, like talking about the senses and all the umami and so on, and wanting to get people back here and so on. So when Renata suggested I speak to you, I was like, yes, please.
Excellent.
And congratulations
Thank you.
Being a new dad. Are you a new dad or is it a...
No, I'm a new dad. I'm a 5-week-old dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's been absolutely fantastic, as much as I hoped it would be, but not without its challenges.
No.
But been really, really awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Very exciting. Yeah. And it's a lot to juggle, isn't it, with all that you do here?
Yeah, it's pretty full on, and we're about to add another restaurant. So we've got Omnia, we've got Yugen Tea Bar, we have Yugen, and we're about to add our event space.
Oh.
Which is literally on probably May 2nd, May 3rd, May 4th maybe will be when we open that up. So that's another one that we've been working on for a while.
And what's that for, weddings and...
Weddings,
corporate?
Birthdays, some corporate, whatever you want. It's an amazing space. It's absolutely beautiful as well.
Where is that?
Upstairs.
Yeah, right.
2 floors up.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that'll be a nice little addition because we get a lot of requests for private dinners and things, but we just don't actually. Omnia doesn't have. Omnia, we do some larger tables. We don't have anything that that entertains a lot of what we get the request for. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of add that to our repertoire of restaurants.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. exciting.
It's a lot. But I feel like you've been in so many incredible places along the way, and then I guess the next challenge is to be overseeing something like this where you're executive chef and overseeing quite a few different restaurants, and they're different cuisines as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think that that's the way it's going to end up when you start off. You know, you think, but the climate changed dramatically, so you kind of have to adapt and take opportunities where you get them. The end goal is always, you know, you want to, you know, as you get more experience, you realize the thing that you're actually in love with is transferable. You know, the restaurants is not just the really intimate fine dining, you know, 40 seats, one menu. There's also different, you know, there's something magical about Omnia as well. It's an amazing place to, as a young chef, to start off. And then it's a great place, you know, if you're, you know, I've got a great team up there. It's a different style of exposure to ingredients. So if you really love, like, you know, the connection between the nature and, you know, the producer, the grower, then bringing that full circle back into the kitchen, like having multiple different styles of restaurants is very rewarding.
And are you still on the tools?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you know, obviously you have to balance it accordingly.
Yeah.
You know, like if you got a day like today where I'm chatting with yourself, you know, the day needs to be adjusted. But then it's also, you know, there's a growing period. You know, for instance, when you open a restaurant like Yugen, I'll have the head chef who operates the hot kitchen downstairs, and I'll do the pass with him. For the first 3-4 months to basically, you know, give them the training that they need, get over the really hairy, intimidating pieces where it's, you know, when you're dealing with everything from, you know, going from the big jumps of covers. You know, you don't do 200 covers right off of the bat. You'll maybe start at 120 and 130. Then when you start really refining the menu, showing them how to operate under different levels of pressure, how to reorganize the kitchen, how to handle mistakes, how to these are all the key principles. But then after a period of time, you have to step back and allow them to flourish. Otherwise, you're just kind of micromanaging them. And then it moves to the point of they're really running the day-to-day of the kitchen, and I am then saying, right, okay, let's start working on this dish. Mud crabs are coming in season. It's, you know, I need you to, you know, free up yourself 5 hours on Wednesday, which might sound like nothing, but that's a huge difficulty when at the start you're just completely scrapping to be set for service. Whereas now then the relationship is different with your head chef, where you're saying, let's work on the dish together. You know, this is how I want to cook it. What do you think? Have you cooked it? And then it's very collaborative. But at the same time, it's a full mentorship process. Whereas I'm always trying to make sure that we're staying true to our original vision with the restaurant. And you know, at the same time, giving them what they want, which is to work next to me to understand how to get to the next level of a chef. So, you know, there's different kinds of on the tools. You know, when you move to something like what I do, when you're actually running the businesses, overseeing the kitchens, you can't, if the restaurants don't work without me filleting the fish, portioning the mud crab, then there's a problem.
Yes.
Whereas there's many different aspects that you need to, you know, that require your attention. So it's a bit of a balancing act. But, you know, that's also just comes with experience.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking as you're speaking, you must be so well organised to hold all those things in your head, because you're thinking of different venues, and then you're thinking about the season that's coming and the mud crab coming in and what you might do with that and who you're going to work with. Is that something you've learned over time? Or
that's definitely something I've learned over time. I didn't have those. I used to always be in awe from when I worked with with, when you're a chef de partie, a sous chef, commis chef, you don't really know what's going on. You're just completing tasks, and all of a sudden things are appearing. Chef de partie, you're becoming a bit more aware. In the old, I say the old days, but 10, 15 years ago, this is my 20th year this year. Wow. 10, 15 years ago, you didn't just chop and change restaurants. You stayed, you worked. That was, you didn't leave until you really, you would be on the veg section for the 4 seasons. So you understood that, in autumn the mushrooms come, in spring that you started to be aware of the game season starts here, that you'd be aware of it. But then as you get a little bit more experience, you're developing supplier relationships, so you're actually working very, very closely. For prime example would be the Tasmanian sea urchin. That's a product that I absolutely love, so I'm working with the producer very, very closely, because I'm tracking it month by month. In my office I have a massive seafood chart that's the same thing that they use at the Sydney Fish Market, so I can see months in advance. So I'll be talking to the supplier, is it happening now? 6 weeks behind, we're expecting it here, okay, it's this size at the moment, in 2 weeks it's going to be exactly what you want, are you ready? Then we're negotiating price. And then now it's, for instance, whereas before I'd just be creating one dish for Omnia, now I'll be saying, okay, we're going to go through this at Omnia. We're going to go with the Irish muffin, we're going to go with a brandy bavois, the sea urchin green Granny Smith apple, and a sea urchin dew. And then I'll be speaking to the sushi teams. Do you guys want some for your omakase? Is this something you feel that you can use? I'll be speaking to the head chef downstairs. How can we incorporate it? So then I'm working with the farmer or the grower or the producer or the fisherman or whoever it is, because I'm trying to buy it. I'm trying to use as much, if it's a hyperly small seasonal produce, I'm trying to buy as much as I can and distribute it, accordingly. And then, the year one when I'm working with the head chef or the sous chef, I will probably be providing the majority of the narrative. But then as the relationship grows, they will be then saying, hey, I know last year we done the sea urchin tart. What do you think about this? And I'll say, brilliant, let's go. Okay, they'll say, do you have a recipe for this? How would you do this? Okay, no problem. I'll show you how I would do it, but I want to see how you're going to organise. So in turn, their skill level is increasing, and I'm really the soundboard and the mentor, and I will then turn my attention to, okay, I'll talk with the som. I'll start looking at a beverage pairing. I'll start seeing if we've got enough time. Can we go and get can we bring this in? Do they still have this great sake? Do they have how much of this particular product? And then hoping the following year they will be then coming to me saying, okay, this is the dish. This is what we're thinking will pair with it beverage wise really well. We actually like to do it tableside, and then the restaurant is improving and improving and improving. And I'm then really able to just provide that very fine, minute detail as if I am the guest.
Yeah. Does that require longevity in staff? What you're talking about is the people who are sticking around.
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
it easy to keep them in the state?
It's not easy it's not easy to keep them at all. But I have when you get to a certain level of chef, which sous chef and above, for instance, Evan Doherty is our head chef at Omnia. He's been with me for 4 years. Now, there's a mutual level of respect. I have things that are that are non-negotiable, and he understands from a perspective non-negotiable of like the guests would suffer, or we have to do this, or this is because it stays in line. But everything else is fully up to the speed and the development of where he's at. And as we build each skill level, he then takes on another level of responsibility at his own pace. And the mutual level of understanding and respect is there, whereas I'm not micromanaging. I'm not screaming and shouting in front of of the boys. I'm literally saying, hey, I've noticed this, I think we could do this. Or he's coming to me saying, I really want to do this, how do you go about it? So it does require longevity, but that's all on the chef. They need to have the maturity to understand that they're getting an opportunity that they won't get in they're not getting hung out to dry. Whereas someone, you go and you might take another job somewhere else, but are you going to have the access to the resources that we are offering here? I highly doubt it. Are you going to have are you going to be in the kind of arena where you can make the mistake and someone else is going to come and help you through the process? That's a massive attribute when you're a head chef. Yeah. When you're learning the ropes, because when the time comes you're going to go and do something else or whatever it be, you want to have made the mistakes with me as opposed to going out and on your own. It's going to be a challenge. So it's a mutual level of trust and respect, and that's the same in all of the restaurants. There's not it's different with certain people depending on their skill and their experience, but I would say it's more a collaboration than longevity. And then I think when you get to a certain level of chef, you've been in the ring long enough that you can see that what we have at Omnia and Yugen, our event space, our production kitchens, our pastry department, it's very rare to see that in Australia. It's something much more commonly found overseas. It's almost like a hotel setup without a hotel, and I promote them above myself. I'll push them hard to get us to the end goal, but the ball is in their court, and I think that some people relish under that opportunity, and of course some people don't like it. But that's natural. So yeah, it's a two-way relationship.
Absolutely. And did you have a mentor or mentors along the way like you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I did. The first chef I worked for was a guy called Brian Moll. He was the chef of Gavroche, a big 2 Michelin. It was 3 Michelin star then. He was the chef there for 14 years. So he left and opened his own restaurant in my hometown, Glasgow. And I started there when I was like 15, 16. And I was there for best part of 6 years. So I went from apprentice to first commis, demi chef, chef de partie, junior sous chef, and then I left. And he that's what he had. It was very, very, he was a great mentor in some aspects, but very old school in some aspects in terms of I loved the screaming and the shouting, but that was part of the criteria back then. But in terms of just handling products, he showed you that, there was true respect long before waste and sustainability was fashionable. We didn't waste anything there. Every single scrap was either refashioned or turned into something else, but it was a very difficult and grueling place. So I learned the rigor of hard work from him as a mentor, and then I left there and took my first kind of sous chef position in restaurant number 1, which is a 1 Michelin star restaurant. And the chef there, Craig Sando, he was just a phenomenal chef, but just an amazing teacher. A very kind, strict, but an excellent craftsman, but very kind and with his time, and had a very gentle approach that was completely opposite to what I'd learned, with Brian, but both just absolutely, key markers in learning. And then when I went to New York, James Kent was another fantastic mentor. Then in Melbourne, obviously Shannon Bennett and Scott Pickett, two fantastic chefs. But then you find other mentors that are not necessarily the chef or the boss. I worked with loads of amazing different guys, like Davey Hall, Brian Lockwood, and even just guys that are still on my team right now. Samuel Holman, John Demetrius. These guys are necessarily, maybe not, the big chef, but they're great. They're fantastic people that you're learning off with. You're learning constantly. I'm still learning right now, but in terms of mentorship, though, I think those early chefs are really going to install. If you don't understand the value of produce and seasonality and how to handle things, then you go into something like a 3-star Michelin restaurant, you're going to get, it's not going to work. Yeah. You're going to get exposed really, really quickly. Or I would imagine that you might find a role, but you're not going to be active in service. You're not going to be cooking. If you don't understand how to handle things, how to portion things, how to, respect ingredients, how to work cleanly and organised, like how to be presentable, how to show that you're a professional as opposed to maybe coming in hungover and not being able to give your 100%. I think those early guys that I worked for, they definitely installed that hard work and rigor. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
It absolutely does. Yes, it does. And so you come from a family of teachers. What made you think about becoming a chef?
School wasn't for me. I don't think. I was a bit of a renegade, a bit of a bad boy. Just more of a cheeky chappy as opposed to anything too bad. But I loved the wind up. I loved getting out there. And I left school at 15 in the summer, and then I just took a job as a kitchen porter just to get some to get some cash under the belt and a bit of independence, and to show that I was actually trying to do something. I didn't even have a clue about, I liked food, I liked eating, but I didn't. I had no idea about the world of, chefs and Michelin stars, and I had absolutely no clue. I worked for an amazing Indian chef, a guy called Nitin Sharma, and a guy called Barry, two Indian guys, and they got me in they could see that, like, shit, this guy actually likes working. I think you need to be a good chef, you need to actually like working. You need to be not afraid of graft, work, hard work, with this thankless work in the early days. They then said to me, do you want to do a day or a few hours here or there in the kitchen? And this is like the most basic of basic stuff. Then I'd done that, and then I was kind of enjoying it, and then they both collectively said to me, like, pulled me aside and were like, look, if you really want to be a chef, you gotta get out of here and you gotta go and work at a top place, otherwise it's a terrible job. They were like personally saying that because they had left India and came to Scotland purely for financial reasons and to try and provide some income that they wouldn't be able to get in their home country for their families. Very admirable kind of sacrifice that these guys were doing. But they were telling me, like, this is a brutal game. When you get old, they were married, they had children, so they knew what they were talking about. I could tell that what they were saying was, they're like basically getting rid of their staff. Like me, who was the guy who was like, the grafter, who's doing all the work, the cleaning, the deep cleaning of all the bullshit that the guys like them don't really want to be doing. So they pointed me in the direction. I literally Googled best restaurant in Glasgow, and the one guy came up all the time, Brian Mall. Went to him, and it was an absolute reality check. For he was like, yeah, you're a blank canvas. You probably last a month. So do you want it? It was £3.10 an hour. Oh. And he was like, I can't give you an hourly rate, but I can give you a salary. It was £7,000 a year. What? Pounds. That was in 2006. Oh, wow. So it was absolute peanuts. But then I got in there, and then I had no idea that there was grown, men and women, that this is their full-time job. I didn't understand that what that level of that I didn't even know what. I just thought it was something on TV. And then I kind of start after a few months of doing all the brutal jobs of the constant deep cleaning, the picking cases and cases of spinach, the peeling mirepoix vegetables by the 50 kilo, doing all the brutal cleaning of girolles, just scraping cases and cases of girolles, cleaning out the guts of all the game birds, the snipe, widget, teal, mallard, grouse, all that. Then I actually started to go, this is really, I'm really enjoying this. And then Brian was like, all right, that was after a few months. He was like, okay, now I know you're not a time waster. I'm happy to take you on and actually devote some time to you, but it's going to be absolutely hardcore. Are you up for the challenge? I was like, I was only 16, so I had nothing to compare it to. I was like, let's do it. And then, the culture there was amazing. It was like we worked hard as hell. But when you're like 16 and you're going out for drinks with the big guys at the end of the night, it was like unbelievable. We would do like 18-hour days, then go to the pub, have 5-6 pints, go out and come back to it. It was amazing. It was like so much fun. And you're learning absolutely heaps. And then next thing I know, I started to really like take it deadly seriously. I started researching and understanding, when all the guys would be talking about the big names like Pierre Kaufman, Nicola Dinas, Marco Pierre White, Gordon Ramsay, then I would start to understand, oh shit, it's in Europe as well. All the big guys in France, your legends like Ducasse, Robuchon, Gagnère, Paul Bocuse. I started to, like, on my own spare time, dedicate myself to, it was only cookbooks, it wasn't YouTube. It was just, you would try and buy them or go to the charity shop and like get these books, or the other chefs would share the books. Then I started to like really like be completely addicted to reading, and getting really into the Michelin kind of star. Then on my holidays, my chef would then set me up stages, and I'd go on my annual leave and go and work in these places in London. London was like the hub of where it was at, and it was just next thing you know, you're like, it's not actually a job, you're just in this constant pursuit of trying to get into these amazing places, whether it be eating in them or trying to get a stage or some or just any kind of exposure whatsoever.
That sounds like such an amazing experience, but I imagine, as you say, it's hard graft, and to get to that point and in that time, especially in Europe,
you
don't have the 8-hour or the working day.
No, that was absolute. That didn't exist.
Yeah. So.
But we didn't want it either. There was no point. Absolutely no. I never in my entire life ever heard anyone in the kit, anyone, even the guys that were married and stuff. They didn't. Maybe it's because it wasn't an idea, but it was either like you worked in the professional kitchens, the ones that were ambitious, that had chasing the Michelin stars, or an offshoot of another one of the big chefs' restaurant, whether it be someone from London or whatever. And then if that wasn't for you and you wanted something that was more approachable, you just went and got a job that, like, they didn't have dinner service. It wasn't like it wasn't like we should blend, it was either that was the landscape. But people, from what I remember, I was very happy doing that. I loved it. It
sounds like you loved it.
It was difficult, but it was you're spurred on by ambition. Because you're like you're fully bought into you read those cookbooks, and like the recipes and the photos of the dishes are amazing, but that's not what I actually loved. I loved the first sections of the book. It was about the chef's story. That was way more inspiring, because then you're like, oh fuck, this guy's like the same as me. And then obviously the other thing that always spurred you on in those things was people looked down their nose at chefs. Even then, there were our hospital, especially front of house, where we were, they didn't understand it. So they're like, people used to always say to me, "So what are you going to do for your real job?" Oh. So you had that, if you're an ambitious person in your mind, you're like, "I'll fucking show you."
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of that, but we were happy doing that. I wouldn't change a single thing about that for, obviously there's certain things that are, clearly, not best practice, but that's the same with any job in any generation. So we were really happy because we were just learning like hell. Now I'm sure if you were in other kitchens that weren't ambitious, but it's, you're talking about just always getting this unbelievable produce coming in, whether it was coming from Scotland, whether it be the game season, whether it was just immaculate shellfish and fish, and you could see that the rigor and the process of the chef and the sous chef trying to make the dishes, with the general manager coming in and providing a little snippets of oh, I'm concerned about that on the tasting menu. It might take too long to eat, or we can't pair something with that, or blah blah, and all the little dramas that would happen in it. You were completely bought in. At no point are you thinking it was a job. So I think that's maybe where that helped as well.
Yeah, I just spoke to someone recently at the Recreation in Fitzroy North, Stephen, and he was saying that he worked in Edinburgh for a while, so he's from Australia, but he was over there, and just the level of produce was so impressive, and that there are families that have been taking care of that particular thing, dating way back. And we talk a lot about how great the produce is here, especially from Gippsland, but how does it compare to that?
Oh, so the produce is completely and utterly different, because, they're completely different. And I don't think it's to compare it worse or better. It's just like the produce, for instance, I work very closely with a asparagus and a corn grower here in Cardinia, John Hobson. Now he's 3 generations he's 80, he was 83 weeks ago, still at the farmer's market. Now his corn, his sunrise corn, his baby corn is absolutely exceptional. The snow corn as well. And, that's a product that, is comparable to what comes from France that I've had exposure to. But it's a very different style purely due to the climate and the way it's grown. But you can't, if you, sometimes in Australia and Victoria, we'll get morels, right? But you cannot compare the morels that you get here to the morels you get in Europe. Same with the black truffle. I think that there's been seasons here that we've had black truffles better than what I was getting from sometimes from Perigord. So I think the produce is very, very different, but it's all about how much effort are you as the chef going to put into dealing with the farmer, because they're very used to just not dealing with chefs who are hands-on on the product side of things and just shipping it into to Queen Vic Market or to the wholesaler, and then the wholesaler dealing with the chef. But if you actually have the relationship, then I get things grown especially for me. So so again, it's kind of like what is how are you for instance, Mark Folletta, my very good friend and grower, his Black Star cherries are better than the majority of cherries I've had in Europe. Now I take the full 100 kilo harvest that he gets. So again, we are working year on year, where he will say to me, I'm not happy with this particular flavor profile. I think that's because this happened. Next year I'm going to but I am just the soundboard to him of oh yeah, to let you know, I've noticed that they weep, or they when I am preserving them, the flavour's not as concentrated as the previous year, and I'm giving him this feedback. Now he's a winemaker by trade, so he's making these adjustments. It's very collaborative again. So I think that the produce, this in terms of, is the produce in somewhere like Scotland just so much better? I think it's very difficult to say that. I don't actually agree with that. I think it just really, really depends on how much work are you putting into your sourcing, because I've had things in Australia that are just absolutely exceptional and second to none.
Of course.
You can't tell me that Steve Folletti from Moonlight Flat in Bateman's Bay, one of the best oyster producers, you can't tell me that man's any less passionate than the best growers in Brittany.
Well, no, absolutely not. And I think too, it can sometimes be our own experiences, can't it? It's the context that you have them in, and if you're not from that place, perhaps too, and you're going and you've known a certain thing. I lived in the south of France for a year, and everyone says the light is different in Provence, and I had friends who worked at the Marché d'International, so they were exporting all the best apricots and tomatoes, and eating an apricot from there was like eating sunshine.
I completely agree with that, and especially in Provence, there is certain things but
I think that's the same. We have regions here as well.
Yeah, if you look at Mildura, produces some absolutely incredible things. If you look I think something that would be a hard pressed winner that would hands beat something down, it would be something like berries and stone fruit. Now, when you get those kind of apricots like you're talking about in Provence that are like jam inside,
Absolutely.
you know, and that is like, because that's their hero, you know, it's their hero product. But you would be able to, I'm pretty sure that if you source it hard enough, you can find these magical moments in Australia, and I think it's just literally about putting the work involved to actually get to, like, something that's a little less sexy would be potatoes. Now, I've got a Gordon Jones from Warrigal. This guy's given me some potatoes before that are just, Scotland's famous for its potatoes, especially in places like Blairgowrie. Unbelievable. But I've had stuff from Jonesy that I'm like, fuck, that's absolutely incredible. So I think it's all tied to memory, sense of occasion. But when you're a chef and you're working with the ingredient, that is very, very different than just looking at something black and white, because I need to know how it performs, how it holds, how it travels, you know, what's its yield. These are all contributing to me saying this is a better grown area than over there. Now, if I'm just making one pomana at home, that's, you know, whether or not the potatoes are, you know, like in the style of rat potato, or whether there's the something like a Nicola. Now, at home I'm making one pomana, it's not so much of a problem. You buy 200 kilos of potatoes at premium price per kg. Now, if the shape of the cut dramatically impacts the execution of the pomana for the restaurant team, that's a problem. But then when you speak to the grower, Jonesy, and I'll say, for instance, I want marble potatoes, and I'll show him. I'll say, look, you know, on my computer I have everything documented from all my travels in Europe and America, and I'll say, like, I want these. Like these here are like about 50-cent size, and they weigh like 5 to 10 grams. And Jonesy will say, one, in Australia we don't have the machinery that when the potatoes are raked from the ground that these get trapped, and two, we can't pay anyone an affordable rate to pick them off of the ground, whereas in Europe that's a much different. Wow. That's something very different. Someone will go on the paddock and pick them up, whereas here he's telling me I can't pay someone enough that means that you're going to buy them, otherwise I'm going to have to charge you $45 a kg. So, you know, there's all these different economic challenges that come into the, you know, handling produce in restaurants.
Yeah.
These are, you know, conversations that people don't really see.
No, well, that's right. And I mean, you're in the business too of creating all those Proustian moments of, you know, as I'm saying, like I remember that apricot and it was in the 90s, but you know, like you're creating those moments every dinner service for people, and so But I think that's interesting though, because I feel like you have to still be your kind of person where you're open to suppliers and they trust you with their product as well. Yeah. I think it's, as you say, it's so collaborative.
Well, that takes a long period of time. Well, that's taken over 10 years to develop the network. So wherever I go, these guys go.
Yeah.
And we, you know, and that's the same for like ceramicists, you know, like, or it might be, you know, the cutlery guy, or it might be the guy who makes all the woodwork, you know, Oreo Randy. It might be, whether it's Andre Davidoff or Oreo Randy or, you know, whoever it is who I'll have some kind of collaborative thing where whenever I've got a new project, I will always give them the first refusal and say, but I give very little direction, because when you get to know someone's work, it's not as enjoyable to just say, okay, I need a platter for afternoon tea. It needs to be 8 centimeters on the bottom, then the next one up needs to be 6, and then that to me is not that awesome. You know, it's not like. Whereas what I would like to say is like, this is how I would like the guest to access. It's got to be lightweight. I've got to be able to clean it and store it. But apart from that, it's totally up to you. And then it means that it's much more, fun for them and fun for me, because it doesn't feel like it's, just random commission.
Yeah. And New York must have been different again.
Yeah, New York is very, very different. And, you know, I was relatively young to move to New York completely on your own with very little money.
And was that just because that was the next big challenge?
Well, yeah, because the thing was I used to always do stages in London. And I had an opportunity to go to Ledbury, and I'd staged there, I think, for a couple of weeks. And I thought, you know, I can always come back to Ledbury. I can't get this, you know, there was something about the New York restaurants at that time that I just loved. I mean, when I first, so that's actually how I feel about it. So when I first worked for that first chef, then we went and represented Scotland for a game dinner in New York. So I was like 18, because the head chef couldn't go because he would have to run the kitchen in the big chef's absence. And I was like the next best guy who didn't have the big responsibility, so I managed to go there. But you know, obviously I was going to get pasted for 2 weeks straight because I would be doing all the cooking while the big man was out, having fun with the other, you know, New York chefs. But he took me there, and like I'd never been in a 3-star. So I'd been to multiple 2-star restaurants in London, but I'd never been to a 3-star Michelin. And at that time, Danielle was a 3-star, Bernadam was a 3-star, I think Jean George was a 3-star, and this guy took me to all these restaurants. Just the culture, the way it was, how, you know, it was a completely different working environment. It was way more, you know, regimented and professional in terms of, like, you know, there was no rock and roll stuff going on there like there was in London. London was absolute, you know, like the Wild Wild West, where this was a little bit more professional in terms of it felt more, I don't want to say, it felt like it was much more of a workplace, whereas in London it was like, you know, you get in and you just bang tools until you get the job done. And then I just absolutely loved it. And I met a big chef over there, a guy called Jason, and he was like, mate, he was an English guy, and he was like, don't go to London, go to New York, because you won't get, there was this J1 visa. He was like, it's much easier to get this if you're under 25. And he was like, get this visa because you can go to London when you come back, but you won't get this visa when you're over 25. They look unfavourable to chefs. If you're over 25. So I was like, that's a good point. That other guy who was the great teacher, Craig Sandel, he had decided that he was going to leave the one Michelin star place that I was working, which was like massive for me because I was absolutely gutted. I absolutely loved him. And I knew, I was like, I'm not going to like go through this with a new chef coming in. There's nothing wrong with a new chef coming in, but I went to work in that restaurant because I heard this guy was an amazing teacher and he was patient. Whereas the other environment that I was in, it was like the minute you made one wrong incision into a fish, it was like, you fucking, you know, it was chaos.
Yeah.
Whereas this guy would, for instance, Sandal would be like, oh, have you ever, you know, boned out a suckling pig? And then I'd say, oh no, I've not. And then he'd go, okay, next Friday, you know, you're off, but come meet me at 7:00 in the butchery. And then there would be like 3 suckling pigs. He'd spend like 5 hours showing you this is how, if you're going to prepare it like this is what you, it was like so I was like dedicated to that guy, and because he was, you know, he was kind. So anyway, when he decided he was going to leave, I'd had the exposure to New York, and then I decided I'm going to just write a letter or an email. I wrote some letters and some emails to all the top kitchens, and you know, obviously I live in Madison Park, Danielle, Jean George, all these. And then EMP was the one that I wanted because that was like modern as hell. The presentation, they had a great website. They had these videos where Chef Hume was like doing, you know, all different kinds of techniques. And then they wrote me a letter and said, replied to my email and said, yep, come to, we'll give you a trial. We can't guarantee you anything, but just come for a trial. So I just, you know, it was literally like $1,500 or pounds for the accommodation and the flight. That was like everything I had. So I just rolled the dice, went in. I had a 2-day trial. First day was just like, you know, skills assessment and putting you through the rigour. And the third day, second day, you had to cook a dish against someone else, and the other guy was from French Laundry, so I was absolutely bricking it because I was like, shit, there's no way I'm going to get chosen over this. But then James Kent, who's now gone on, he's got a 1-star called Crown Shine, a 2-star called Saga. He gave me the opportunity and said, look, if we can help you, we can sponsor you, but you need to get the visa, but we'll give you the job. But then that was it. I made the call, rolled the dice, I'm going to New York, saved up every single thing. Luckily I had a friend who he knew, a guy I'd never met in New York. He said he could put me up for 3 days, so I had 3 days to find an apartment. And I've got an apartment luckily when I made the move in Harlem, which was is in upper west side, and luckily I got a room in there for managed to just get my head down and get that year-long J1 visa, and that was it. But a completely different environment to what I was used to. It was extremely organised on another level. Super, every avenue of 11 Madison Park was just filled with passion, from the front of house to the Psalms, to the office team, to the marketing people, to the chefs, to the kitchen porters. It was just complete professionalism, which was just amazing and very inspiring.
I saw a documentary, or there was something.
Yeah, it was like the making of when they done the refurb, was it?
Yes, and it was just like choreography, watching them all work together. How big is the staff?
I don't know what it is now. That's going on 10 years since I was there, but when I was there, we had well over 40 chefs and well over 50, 60 front of house.
Well, you'd have to be organised.
Yeah, you definitely need to be. You need to be organised, because the workload that we had there, if you were running a section there, not just a prep guy, which some guys start in the prep team and then they'll make their way to the sections. But luckily, I got on cooking straight away. The mise what we call the mise en place list there is, you would not be able to give that to people these days. It would, you would probably. They would be saying that was a mental health challenge. I think it was just absolutely enormous amount of work, but you had a very short space of time to prepare it, and everything was made from absolute scratch every single day. It was just incredible, and we've done a lot of covers. We've done over 150 covers there. So yeah, that was New York. An eye-opener, but just filled with, not just for those fine dining moments, just exposure to Mexican food, great burgers, barbecue, and smoking, amazing bar culture, phenomenal pizzas, old school hospitality, that kind of very romantic sense that Americans have with how they deliver things, and just an amazing arts culture that they've got there, from street performers to museums. It's just an unbelievable place to live and learn. I still reference huge amounts from my time there.
Amazing. I had a few days in New York, but it was a few years ago, and there was an Arctic storm, so it was largely covered in snow.
Oh, right, yeah.
So kind of dampened things for a while. But so then, what did you come to Melbourne after that?
I did. I went back to Scotland for 3 months, because my actual now wife, but at the time when I went to New York, she actually didn't get a visa, so we were apart for whatever it was, 12, 15 months, and I went back for 3 months just to woo her, win her back. Then she wanted to travel, but deep down I had no intentions of traveling. When you come out of a restaurant like 11 Madison Park, you're really only wanting to continue learning, and so I was happy to go to Melbourne for a little bit, and then get back, get to somewhere else that was a big name. So I thought I would only be in Melbourne for 6 months, but that's nearly 10 years later. Yeah.
And is it the people and the venues that have kept you here?
The lifestyle as well. It's very different to the UK and Scotland. But I've taken some big risks and had some big opportunities. So things have kind of worked out in a way that I didn't actually imagine. I then have slowly just it's just became home. And now I've got like, a terrific, team that I've been working with. Some of the guys I've been working with for nearly 8 years. And I have, a great group of friends out with, the hospitality industry. And I just in Melbourne, I just absolutely love it. So now I just couldn't see myself going anywhere else. It'd be very, very difficult. But it creeps up on you. You're not thinking that. When Shannon convinced me to stay longer than 6 months at Vue de Monde, I literally thought, I was like, I'll do another 3 months and I'll be out of here. I'll be in Sydney. I'll do 6 months in Sydney, then I'll get back to France, because I actually had a great opportunity at Toigro, and I was kind of thinking like, I'll do this like sabbatical for a year, then I can get back to the real stuff. But then like when I loved Vue de Monde, absolutely loved it, and then I thought, after Vue de Monde, I thought, I'm going to have a crack and try and open a restaurant in Melbourne, because Melbourne's an amazing hospitality scene, and it had, I think at that time, the kind of emergence of not just the wine bar, but these kind of smaller restaurants, which is which sounds odd because I have do Omnia, yeah. But those smaller, more humble restaurants I absolutely love. Those more under the less heavy duty. I thought, there's actually a good space here that I might actually have the opportunity and time to get get a venue like that. And then it's the lure of the big challenge kind of sucks you back in. Next thing you know, you're like on a massive journey like this.
Well, I think lucky for Melbourne.
Melbourne's been very good to me, so I'm forever in its debt, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
It'll be perfect.
All right, excellent.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Conversation with a Chef with Stephen Nairn at Yugen Dining. You can check out so much loveliness on Instagram at Yugen Dining, that's at YUGEN Dining, all one word, and Omnia Bistro, OMNIA Bistro, again, all one word. If you liked what you heard and you want to hear about some other chefs, I'm on Instagram at Conversation with a Chef. You can read the chat at www.conversationwithachef.com, and of course you can follow me on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I'd love it if you told a friend about these chats, and thanks again for listening. Have a great day.